Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and WNST.net. If we couldn't laugh, we would all go insane, just like Jimmy Buffett coming to the Royal Farms Arena on March 30th. And, misery loves company. So as much as I've called around this week to Philadelphia, and New England, and Pittsburgh, and some of these other places, Jacksonville, they're all happy. Buffalo, they're all whistling zippity-doo-dah. I figured I'd go to Ohio where, if you're stuck in the middle in Columbus or someplace like that, you can claim the Bengals and the Browns and Ohio State and be really, really miserable, especially when it's like 5 below. Brent Sobleski checks all the boxes. He is out in Ohio. He covers all things NFL for Bleacher Report. He is our friend and foil, and at times of misery like this, the good news about all this is Marvin got to keep his job, and I'm friends with Marvin, so I'm happy to be seeing Marvin eating chili when I get flatulent in Cincinnati. And I know everybody that hates Marvin's glad he's there too, and the Browns are the Browns, and we're all watching the Steelers play and take a week off. It's miserable right now, no matter who you are, right? The Bermuda Triangle here.
Well, first of all, hello, Nestor. Second of all, I don't know what you're talking about. We're celebrating perfection here in Ohio. 0-16 just doesn't happen. And the fact that we got to see that greatness throughout an entire campaign shouldn't be overlooked. And what it took to come to that situation is utterly amazing and fascinating to watch. And so, obviously I'm being facetious with the approach with the teams and exactly where they're going in somewhat questionable means. But you know what? What they're showing here in Ohio, at least with the Bengals and the Browns, is continuity. And we can argue back and forth whether that's a good thing or whether that's a bad thing. But they're both preaching patience. And for two teams that haven't quite gotten over the hump, with Cleveland being competitive on a consistent basis or Cincinnati in the playoffs, there's still the belief within their current coaching staff that they can eventually become better long term. With Marvin Lewis, you have the two-year contract extension, and now with Hugh Jackson being teamed with John Dorsey and Alonzo Highsmith, maybe getting them on the same top-down philosophy. These are things that they're trying to spin positively moving forward so that we don't all just wake up every morning and cry into our cereal.
Well, and I would say at this point, for all of us in the division to watch Pittsburgh do this, Cincinnati clearly has taken 2 steps backward, and now they'll try to go forward with Marvin again. We have the same situation here where we haven't made the playoffs in 3 years, man. So let's not. We were on the outside watching the Vontaze Burfict, Porter situation, Harrison a couple years ago, and all the nonsense that went on when Cincinnati had actually beaten Pittsburgh and gave the game back to them. But we're all sitting around now chasing them, and you can't say you're close when you finish 3 and 4 games back from Pittsburgh, that it's, a three-headed race the way it's been in the past. There is a clear separation that's going on here. And what happened to the Ravens at the hands of the Bengals on Sunday at 4th and 12 on the back end of 30,000 empty seats and all the problems and the discontent that they would have here, just not making the playoffs in general. This is as code red a moment for Steve Bisciotti and for whatever the strategy is going to be here with Ozzie, with Eric, with John, with the coaching staff, with Joe Flacco, with Terrell Suggs, with Eric Weddle, with Marshall Yanda, with these veteran players that they have, these 30-somethings. I mean, Ben Wallace is 38 years old. He led the team in receptions. I mean, and had a bad offense that was getting better at the end of the year because it got healthier. But there's going to be a long time living this down. I don't know when the next 12-4 or 13-3 is coming down the line here, but you're not going to be able to convince me between now and Labor Day that they can improve this thing enough to think that they're going to catch the Steelers in the next 12 months.
I think you hit the nail on the head, Nestor, and it comes down to one specific word you stated: health. And when you look at what the Ravens organization endured this year, a massive amount of major injuries they suffered was mind-blowing. Now, I understand the NFL is a 100% injury league, but it all depends on who's getting injured and for how long. And that's really what affected Baltimore going forward, specifically looking towards the offensive line. Then you sprinkle in a little abrupt retirement from John Urschel, and you're completely revamping your offensive line. line a week before the season starts, and that has profound effects on your entire offense. Now, is there talent lacking in certain areas? Absolutely. Wide receiver core needs to be revamped. Basically strip it to the studs and start over with. And you might be able to do that since Mike Wallace is a free agent. Jeremy Maclin may be a salary cap casualty. Tight end,
boy, was he a disappointment, right? I mean, Maclin, right? Like,
Agreed, absolutely.
A healthy, good version of him. Not a great version of him, but a guy that could go out and catch 4 to 7 balls a week, catch it when it's thrown to him, create some separation, maybe account for a first down or two, a touchdown every couple, 3-4 weeks. I mean, he didn't need to be a 90-catch machine, He just needed to be what Mike Wallace has been, which is good enough. Mike Wallace earned his money this year. Mike Wallace was not part of the problem. He was part of the solution this year.
Well, with Maclin, you're absolutely right. Well, the one thing is, we'll look at it schematically. When you have Joe Flacco as your quarterback, you're not going to be dinking and dunking all game long, and that's really where Maclin succeeds. He's someone that is very good after the catch. He's a good route runner. He's going to get open. He's going to be that chain mover for you. He's not going to be the guy that stretches your offense vertically. That's where Mike Wallace fits. That's where Joe Flacco succeeds. When you're running the ball effectively and then want to build off a play-action passing game, you need guys that can give you explosive plays. Macklin's no longer that player. He was early in his career. He's not today. And as such, you're not utilizing him correctly unless you're keeping him as that slot receiver, as that guy that continually be your security blanket. And right now, when you look in their passing attack, I think it's very disjointed in how it's built and how you're going to game-by-game basis. And you didn't see it become more successful until later in the year when Alex Collins really started to take off. He became your focal point of your offense. It allowed you to set up the pass through a strong running game. Because early in the year, they were trying to set up the pass, use the pass to set up a run, and it completely failed. Because one of the most surprising statistics that I have for the last 2 years in the NFL prior to this season was the Baltimore Ravens led the NFL in passing attempts. And we know how successful that was. So now you're looking at a good, strong running game and able to push the ball downfield. But other than Mike Wallace, you really didn't have that threat, and it limited what you could do. And so that's why I look at their wide receiver core and think to myself, you need to get talent. You need to add big, tall, strong, fast wide receivers on the outside that can do some work, that can really create one-on-one mismatches. And there's no one right now within that core that consistently does that. And that's why that offense cannot establish much of a rhythm in the passing attack, because today is a matchup league in the NFL, and they don't have that consistent mismatch.
All right, so then you say, well, I mean, you could draft to do that, right? So, I mean, that Brashad Perryman guy that couldn't even get on the field in the fourth quarter of the season, season 3, a healthy season. Boy, did they miss on him. Wow, swing, miss, whiff. And, everything you just said, you just slobbered on for 3.5 minutes about wide receivers and Joe Flacco and a $25 million quarterback, and they figured out the offensive line and they protected him, and there was no mismatch. And every week we have a mismatch when Jimmy Smith isn't out there for sure. Defensively, every week we're seeing an A.J. Green. Every week we're seeing a Dez Bryant or whoever it would be, and say, well, we need that Humphrey. We need that Jimmy Smith. We don't provide that sort of pressure on a defense. But when you miss on draft picks, when you miss on Matt Elam, when you miss on Terrence Brooks, when Kamalea Correa doesn't get on the field, when Brashad Perryman isn't on the field, this is what happens. And that is an Ozzie Eric issue. That is a coaching issue to say, how could you be so wrong about Brashad Perryman? And you wonder how you missed the playoffs 3 years in a row? Well, you got a $25 million quarterback and a 25-cent receiving core. Griff Whalen was playing wide receiver this year,
When you have Brashad Perryman absolutely falling flat this year, it's a problem. It's a problem overall, especially with the fact that you bank so much on him being that big-time weapon that I stated. It's obviously injuries played a factor, but he's just not developed. And you brought up a point that I think is a bit taboo around the NFL, or at least those of us discussing the league, is Ozzie Newsome is generally regarded as the best talent evaluator in the NFL. Yet we don't have much to show us that in recent years. The Ravens' great drafts happen almost a decade ago, if not more. Where is that talent coming from? It's not being infused in the system, and the organization has tried to make up for those mistakes by signing like Jeremy Maclin or an Austin Howard or guys that are big-name free agents who they think can fill the void instead of developing that
Well, think about how many tight ends that they've drafted around here, and they still had to go get Ben Watson. Think about how many safeties they've drafted around here, Brooks, Elam, right? And they had to spend money and go get Weddle and spend money and go get Jefferson. So, that really is a core problem. It's something that they didn't have to do back in the glory era. They went and plucked Rod Woodson and Shannon Sharp, and Siragusa and McCrary. They went and got those guys because Boulware, Lewis, Sharper, Herring, Ogden, all of that was gold, and they wound up winning with Trent Dilfer. You know what I mean? Like that was the position they couldn't figure out was quarterback back in that era. Everything else they touched draft pick wise during that Phil Savage early era of Ozzie. Those guys all got on the field. I mean, every Cornell Brown, every Brad Jackson, every Jeff Mitchell in the 5th round, every Adelis Thomas. I mean, even undrafted guys like Priest Holmes and Mike Flynn and Eddie Mulatalo was a draft. All of those guys played long, well, value. They were all that in a bag of donuts, and we have in the modern era just a real hodgepodge. I mean, I'll give you C.J. Mosley and a Brandon Williams, but they're not going to the Hall of Fame. You know what I mean? It's different than Ed Reed, and the bar was so high for Ozzie, right? I mean, no one's ever drafted like that over 10 years, really, right?
Exactly. And when the first draft in your organization's history gives you Jonathan Ogden and Ray Lewis, you set a bit of a standard. It's impossible to keep up for the long term. It's unbelievable. But the reality is you aren't bringing in the talent you once did, and you have to adjust in some form or fashion, and we have not seen that in Baltimore. Instead, you continue to rely on some of your stalwarts that have been there for a long time, Terrell Suggs being, the obvious example. And yet they have found talent, and I'll give credit for, you said, Mosley and Williams. I love Michael Pierce. They've done a great job bringing in Jensen this year to be center. He'll be one of the top available centers on free agency. But how
much money is he going to get, Brent?
Say that again.
How much money is he going to get, Ryan Jensen?
Well, I was looking at the free agent market yesterday, as a matter of fact, and who was going to be available. Other than, I would say, with Westberg out of the Giants, those are the two young free agent centers. So I would be looking at a J.C. Treader deal, most likely probably around that $25 million range over 4 or 5 years, to keep him, to retain him. And that's something we didn't discuss that needs to be when in regards to the Ravens and their offseason plans. Not only is Mike Wallace a free agent if you're not going to retain him, but two of your starters, two guys that started all 16 games this year, and Hurst and Jensen, are free agents. You may have to make a decision. It may be one or the other. You might not be able to keep both of them, and then you are again trying to fill a hole along the offensive line, and that's problematic because...
Well, they have Alex Lewis and they have Marshall Yanda coming back, so they do have that happening, and, Yanda feels like is he going to play like a Hall of Famer? I don't know, but, he's rounded about, and they loved Alex Lewis. They drafted this kid, Nico Siragusa, who looked great in the 3 weeks before he tore his knee up in training camp, so, there is more there than that, but certainly at the center position with Jensen, it would seem to me to be that's a kid that they want to keep around, that they groomed in, that they're gonna pay to keep their own in that case. Just how pricey will it get would be the question, I would think.
Yeah, the one question I would have beyond that is if you do re-sign him, you're still working from a point where you haven't had these 5 offensive linemen on the field at any point. And without that continuity, even though you may upgrade talent-wise, and obviously you will with a Yonda and Lewis maybe for Hurst, we're replacing them, how good can you be moving forward? How long will it take for you to finally get on the same page and start building towards something? And that's the goal, right? That's what we're looking at. How do you displace the Pittsburgh Steelers? And one of the things the Steelers have been very good at, we can talk about the killer bees with Ben and Bell and Brown and even Martavis Bryant, but he's a free agent. That offensive line has been one of the steadiest and most consistent in football over the last 2 years, and it gets overlooked because of all that offensive skill position talent. And that's where you need to be successful. to help a Joe Flacco, because we know he's not the most mobile guy. You need to be able to build the pocket, allow him to be comfortable back there, and especially if you want to continue to rely on the vertical game, because that takes time to develop. So that's why I'm starting in the trenches and looking at that. It's so key to the Ravens potentially getting back to where they once were, because you have to be able to win at the line of scrimmage consistently, and they didn't this year.
He is Brent Sobleski. He does it out at Bleacher Report from Oh, How I Hate Ohio. All of it brought to you by Al's Seafood in Essex. That's something they can't get out in Ohio. Brent's going to need me for that. I've been getting crabs and crab cakes down there in Essex since the 1970s. Go see him at the foot of 702 at Stemmers Run and Eastern. You know right where they are. We lost Big Al last month, who was a bone marrow transplant survivor. Survived 3 decades after a bone marrow transplant. Unbelievable story that we shared with everyone. Go give Chad the Crab Man some love down there. I certainly did. Get yourself some, some shrimp. Pick up a 6-pack in the liquor store. Sit down, eat some crabs. Take some crab cakes home to the family. Some shrimp in there with the onions and the beer and all the nonsense and the Old Bay. Or just take home some crab cakes you can fry up at home. Al's Seafood, dine in, take out, carry out, and much love to them on the loss in 2018 to start their year down at Al's. Also, our friends at King Discount Liquors, I stopped by and gave the King a ring, picked up a couple bottles of wine and a 6-pack of a winter ale for my wife. Lottery beer, booze, and the best prices in Baltimore. I've been buying these lottery tickets thinking, what would I do with $400 million? I can think of a lot of things I would do, but you got to play to win, right? King Discount Liquor. Stop by, give the King a ring over in Rosedale. Brent, we got playoff games this week. I know nobody in Ohio or Maryland really wants to hear that. The Redskin fans are used to it. That's my little cheap shot at them. But, I've never rooted for the Philadelphia Eagles in my life, but I'm about to because of Joe Douglas and Jimmy Schwartz and Torrey Smith. They're going to be one of my chosen teams here this month. I would think it's some small miracle for them to be in Minnesota. I think it's really neat that Minnesota can be in Minnesota, and I have a lot of friends in that organization, and I'll be stuck up out there 12 below zero for 9.5 days as well. It'll be like planes, trains, and automobiles out there for the Super Bowl, but that would be a neat story. And then there's this whole Drew Brees thing, and the door being open for the Saints maybe being the best complete team left on that side of the bracket. But, boy, that NFC side's kind of wild and open, right?
The door isn't cracked for the New Orleans Saints. It has been blown open. And I state that because they're now the most complete team in the NFC, and that's stunning considering where that defense has been in recent history. They've been absolutely atrocious on that side of the ball, but they continue to stick with their plan and added key pieces to really develop a young, aggressive, and a much faster defense than we've seen in recent years. A lot of that has to do with first-round pick Marshawn Lattimore, who could very easily be the defensive rookie of the year. Stepped in from day one, was that became a quote-unquote shutdown corner, and he allows them to shift the coverage to the other side because he can take away a top receiver. The other aspect of the Saints that's absolutely intriguing is not Drew Brees. He's the X factor. Where they're really built now on offense is that running game and what they can do out of the backfield with Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram. They are spectacular in the backfield and the ability to control a game. They don't need to have the quick score offense anymore like we grew accustomed to for so many years under Sean Payton. This is a team that can drive it down your throat. They can have their backs out of the backfield, exploit mismatches. They have talent at wide receiver. They play good defense. And, they have Drew Brees. So when I'm looking at the NFC, that's the team that, to me, is the most complete. That's the team that has the best opportunity to make a run right now because they have the best ability to beat you in multiple different ways.
He is Brent Sobleski. Tell everybody what you do at Bleacher Report, because I know you're going to be watching these AFC games this weekend, and you've been writing for a long time there. You also contribute at the OBR. But this is a big weekend, I think, for everybody. And as much as we can poo-poo these AFC games and say, the real tournament begins next week, go to Pittsburgh and New England, wake me up when that starts, Tyrod or Alex Smith or whomever it's going to be this week. Although, I wouldn't put it past the Chiefs here to be dangerous next week. But, once these games get started, this is a pretty good tournament this year. I think with the big bad Patriots and Steelers sort of waiting on the other side and the weirdness of the NFC and the quarterbacks, plus the new blood of the Goffs and the Bortles, and let's see who the next Andy Dalton's going to be, and let's see who the next Tom Brady's going to be, right?
Well, first of all, the best sub story for me, at least going into this year's playoffs, is the fact the Buffalo Bills and the Tennessee Titans both made it on the final day. And the last time the Buffalo Bills made the playoffs was when they played the Tennessee Titans in the Music City Miracle.
I was at that game, Brent, by the way. So, yeah, I remember that. I was one of the 32,000 that stayed in the bowl and watched the play, and I was with my girlfriend at the time, before I knew my wife. That's how long it's been, right? So, I've been married 15 years, Brent, so it was before my wife. But I was with my girlfriend, and I said to her, I'm like, there's no way that play's legal. I mean, I was standing on the 35-yard line when it happened on the club level. I'm like, that's not a legal play. There's no way this is going to.
Well, it's kismet. It's beautiful. It's wonderful how the universe works sometimes. But you're right. There's a lot of sub stories here. There's a lot of things that's very intriguing. Even if you believe, as I do, that ultimately it's going to be the Steelers and/or Patriots that come out of the AFC. They are obviously the two best teams in the NFL. You expect one of them to represent the AFC. But looking at that side of the equation, first of all, the upstart Jaguars, how you can't enjoy watching them, I'm not exactly sure, because that defense is smothering. They have attitude. They come at you. Not only do they come at you in waves along their defensive front, but their defensive backs are going to talk smack and shut you down the entire game. That's just the way they play, and you got to love that type of attitude. And yet you have on offense Blake Bortles. Who is going to show up, or which version, I should state, is going to show up of Blake Bortles? He had a wonderful stretch about a month ago, played very well, started to teeter off a little bit here in the last couple contests. Can he do enough for them to legitimately compete? And that's very interesting to me to watch and see how they perform. The Chiefs went from the team that trounced the New England Patriots, winning 5 in a row to start the season, to they're losing the next 6 of their next 7, then winning the last couple again. Which version is going to show up? Because as good of a coach as Andy Reid is, the one thing I question is he getting the most out of this roster? And I state that and question that because this is a very, very good team. They have been for multiple years now, and yet they kind of come up flat in the postseason, much like our Bengals conversation earlier. A very talented organization that's run well, that's doing things positively, but can't seem to get over the hump. Can they finally become that team? Can they be the Chiefs that we saw early in the year? And I think that's a great story to follow here, especially early in the process. And finally, on the NFC side, the one name you hit on that I am fascinated to watch is Jared Goff and the Los Angeles Rams. Sean McVeigh is the NFL Coach of the Year. I don't know how you could vote for anyone else. The turnaround that we've seen from Jeff Fisher to Sean McVeigh and the way that organization run is absolutely staggering. And I want to see the NFL's second youngest team really mature and grow and become a contender on that side of the equation.
Well, tall test Saturday night. I mean, I think Atlanta coming in there with the experience they have, despite some injuries, Mac amongst some other things. That'll be a test game for both of those organizations. And any chance I get to hate on Cam Newton in January, I'm all in on Drew Brees. I'm going to be a Saint this weekend. So, hey, who are we going to see in Minnesota, Brent, so I can come back and pester you in 4 weeks here when I'm out there?
That sounds good. And I'll make sure to bundle up because I'm already doing it.
What's your pick, man? You got to give me the 2 teams.
Oh, well, I'll stick with my preseason pick simply because I don't want to be that person that wavers. I had the Patriots and the Vikings going into this season.
Really? So you're on the Case Keenum train. All right, well, that would be a fun week to go out there because I own a lot of purple. I've already told everybody. If the Vikings are the team out there, I got the right color to wear for the week. So.
Well, I don't, obviously. But maybe I'll pull some out so I can, or go buy some. That way I can wear the color of Kings for one weekend.
Skull. See you soon, man. There he goes. Brent Sobleski out at Bleacher Report. You can follow him at BleacherReport.com. Also a contributor at the OBR. He is Brent Sobleski. That's Sobleski out on Twitter. I got to go to decaf. The buy at Toyota.com audio vault there 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world. Our morning newspaper ships to your email inbox at 7 a.m. each and every morning. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com, where it's still $10 a month. My Ghost of Baltimore football, past, present, future there. Readable, 18,000 words. I'm going to be writing more in 2018 because I'm I'm inspired to do so. Also because the Ravens gave me some extra time. So we're going to hear from John Harbaugh this week. I'm assuming we're going to hear from Steve Bisciotti next week. Lots going on around here, lots of conversations. If you miss any of it, you can find it out at WNST.net. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook Live as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. And don't forget, any breaking news at all out of Owings Mills or when the Orioles finally decide to deal Manny Machado, that's a joke. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard, and Dennis will be here on Thursday to get you ready for Wild Card Weekend. Football, and more football that we're not a part of. It sucks. I'm Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.